But first, who will protect animals in Edmonton?
We're willing to enter into a discussion with the City of Edmonton about what animal protection inside the City of Edmonton will look like moving forward. It has the potential to double our call load over right now.
It's incredibly important. I mean, it certainly could be transferred to an animal control agency or a police service, but neither of which are really equipped to deal with this very niche form of enforcement.
Reaction to a decision that leaves animals in the Edmonton area with one less layer of protection. The Edmonton Humane Society announced it can no longer enforce the Animal Protection Act. In a written statement, the organization said, quote, "This decision was made in early December of 2018 and was a very difficult one for our organization." For more on this, I am joined by Peter Sankoff, professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Alberta and a member of the Board of Directors of Animal Justice. Peter, EHS says it simply does not have the resources necessary to follow the policy changes to the Peace Officer Act, which will now require officers to work in pairs on calls, and it requires some more officer training. What do you think of this decision?
I think it sounds like a sensible decision, quite frankly. I think that for more than 100 years, government has dumped the protection of animals and investigations relating to animal cruelty in the laps of a private organization, and they are effectively told to do the best they can with it and come up with their own funding to deal with it. And I think that's a very serious problem. And I think what the inquiry has revealed here is that these officers are dealing in areas that are not safe. They're doing investigations that are extremely difficult, and they need to do them in a different way. And again, those costs are essentially expected to be borne by a private organization. And I think the Edmonton Humane Society finally said they just are unable to do that.
And as you mentioned, those difficult situations, we are now hearing reports EHS also cited safety concerns in their decision to stop enforcing the act. That animal protection employees, they're often put in very dangerous situations. So should this work be left to perhaps city police?
It's been our organization's submission that it should always be in the hands of the police, or at least in some body that is affiliated with the police. There are a lot of potential models that can be used, but there was a safety audit conducted in Ontario, as well as the one done here in Alberta some years ago. And what it showed is that investigators are put in very dangerous positions. And these, let's be clear, these are not police officers. I have all the respect in the world for the Humane Society investigators who do this because they love it, but they do not have the training, the ability, the weapons, the controls that are required. And what the Edmonton Humane Society was saying is, as soon as you require us to double up officers, which is, it's a sensible idea, you're essentially, again, offloading these expenses onto the backs of a private charity that has to make real-world decisions about the types of work it can do for animals. And I think what we are holding on to here, in a certain sense, is a model that's been it's the only model like this in Canada. It's the only place where we say, go investigate crime, a private organization, go do that and bear the costs of doing it. And it's always been done that way because animals are effectively second-class citizens who we don't really want to protect in the same way as humans. And I think the Edmonton Humane Society's decision here, believe me, this is not the last decision of this type. It is probably the first, or it's not even the first. Other provinces have had the same result with their SPCAs and humane societies.
Yeah, you mentioned animals being second-class citizens. So what are the laws around animal protection in our province? Where are we lacking?
Well, the problem is, we could talk about laws in detail. There are problems with the substantive law, but like leaving aside the substantive law for a moment, what we're really lacking is an enforcement structure that actually makes sense. It is very unusual. It's really a historical anachronism, one that goes back to the 1800s, in which humane societies took up the lead of animal protection because nobody else would. And believe it or not, that's what we're still doing. Even in an era where it's clear that others may be willing to take up this level of protection if they were asked to do so. But I mean, if I were the government and I had an organization that was happily willing to offload my costs for free, what incentive is there for me to ever set up a governmental organization that would actually deal with these matters? So I'm just not convinced by the comments that suggest that there's no way this could be done by anyone but humane societies, because that's just patently not true. There are lots of places around the world and lots of jurisdictions in Canada, frankly, that deal with this as well without the abilities of humane societies to get involved. And I think it's time to really have a fresh look at the way in which we do this. It's the only way we'll be able to move forward with a more sensible investigative structure in future that addresses some of these concerns, both around safety and around animals.
What does that fresh look like, I guess? I mean, we know enforcing the Animal Protection Left, it's currently, or the Act rather, it's left up to municipalities right now. But would you like to see the responsibility shifted more so onto the province, or what would you like to see?
It's really premature to start, when you have a system that's been in place for so long and you start to show some cracks, the first sign is seeing those cracks and then trying to envisage what it's going to look like going forward. Before this, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a big decision out of Ontario in which an Ontario judge decided upon the constitutionality of provincial decisions to put matters in the hands of the Ontario SPCA. And essentially that was the same sort of seismic shot that started a conversation, because it's difficult for me to envisage exactly how we do it. What I do know is there needs to be a robust discussion about how we do it, because there are other models out there for public-private enforcement, for mixtures of having SPCA investigators deal with certain minor matters in coordination with the police for other matters. There are lots of potential solutions out there. It's difficult to say which would be the best for Alberta without actually discussing it. That's what's really needed here.
We need more discussion. I want to touch on what it looks like in Calgary right now. At the Calgary Humane Society, they employ about 5 peace officers, paid mostly through donations and city grants. So some might be asking, how is it that that city is perhaps managing if they have a similar caseload to what we're seeing in Edmonton?
Well, I don't know anything about, unfortunately, I don't know anything about the revenues of the Calgary Humane Society versus the Edmonton Humane Society, because revenue is one. Second is cost, and choices that are made by the organization. Remember that every time a private organization makes a choice to deal with certain matters, such as investigations, they have finite resources, and they're not getting adequate funding from the municipality or the province. So they've got to make choices. So the Edmonton Humane Society may well have made other choices that they think are equally important: shelters, advocacy programs, education programs, and frankly, I applaud them. If the Calgary Humane Society believes that investigation is a core part of its mandate, it's something it needs to do, more power to them. I think that's something they're entitled to make a decision as an organization within the existing structure of the way in which we deal with animal cruelty investigations. Whether that's the best decision for animals or Albertans is really a question I'd like to see identified with a little bit more clarity and vision.
Yeah, certainly a lot of questions left. We know the report on different solutions for Edmonton to consider is headed to Council on February 11th, so it'll be an issue that we continue to watch. Thank you so much for your perspective on this, Peter.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That is Peter Sankoff, professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Alberta and a member of the Board of Directors of Animal Justice.